Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Behind the Mic for this Friday, June the 25th. Many thanks for tuning us in once again, wherever you may be watching from on ASTV Productions tonight. I'm your host, Jonathan Hodgson, back with another conversation with a great sportscaster, and we're really excited about the show this evening. We're joined by Edmonton Elks color analyst Dave Campbell. We'll talk a little bit about the upcoming season in the CFL, the return to play after last season was lost to COVID. Recently announced 14-game regular season starting up in August with the Grey Cup set for Hamilton in December. We'll talk to Dave about what the past year looked like without a CFL season, how excited he is for the restart, and to get back in the booth with the Elks, the newly renamed Edmonton Elks, and we might get into some of the details into what the CFL season will look like this year, some subtle changes to the product in this unusual season. So we look forward to talking some football before we broaden it out and talk about Dave's career in sportscasting. He's been on the airwaves on 630 CHED in Edmonton for about 25 years, covering the Edmonton Elks, doing CFL games since 2006, currently working beside Morley Scott, and before that, Bryan Hall. Also the producer of Inside Sports with Reid Wilkins. We'll talk about that and some of his other experiences from being on the airwaves covering the Edmonton sports scene. So we look forward to diving into that with him. And before we take our first break, we'll remind you that you can find all of our shows here, past shows, current shows, on astvproductions.com, simulcast on Facebook, and on the website is also where you can find all of our shows here, all of our other shows on ASTV, and our live game broadcasts. So we invite you to check us out and all of our other shows. We'll take a break here, and after our first break, we'll come back on the other side with Dave Campbell, the color analyst for the Edmonton Elks of the CFL on 630 CHED in Edmonton. Thanks for tuning us in tonight. We look forward to this one. We'll be back after a break here on Behind the Mic. And once again, welcome back to Behind the Mic here on ASTV Productions. Jonathan Hodgson joined now by our guest this week, Dave Campbell from Edmonton. Dave, thanks so much for coming on with us.
Thanks, Jonathan. It's good to be here.
Now that we were talking before we went on, that's quite the backdrop you've got there. Yeah. Tell us where you're at and where some of that stuff came from.
Well, I've been working from home since the pandemic started back in March. Well, what was it? March 11th, 2020. Sorry. All the days seem like they run together now. So I've been home since March 16th, 2020, working from home, and this is where I've ended up. So this is the office that actually my brother-in-law kind of designed and my wife designed, and my brother-in-law painted a lot of it. So did my wife, and my brother-in-law finished it last year. Just give me kind of an office because I was, working in the garage, for a few weeks, and then it got a little hot in there, and so I needed a space, and we finished the office. It's something that we wanted to do here. So of course it's a splashy green and gold feel. It's a lot of. It's kind of warm, and it's nice to be here when you got to work from home and be comfortable. So, that's the story around the office. It's a green and gold feel, and this is where I am right now until I'm able to go back into the office whenever that happens.
Yeah, in the last 15 months or however long it's been, it seems like it's been a crash course for all of us sportscaster types, and everybody's had their own experience with learning on the fly and improvising. I know even now, as things are starting to normalize, especially in the US, there's a lot of minor league baseball broadcasters who aren't able to travel and who are recreating games from the studio. I've heard from lots of radio show hosts who've done shows from their kitchens the last year. What is this last year or so taught you? What lessons has it taught you that you didn't see coming?
Well, it's interesting because if there was a pandemic, 10 years ago, we couldn't do it like this. I mean, we just couldn't. I mean, you'd need a lot more actual physical equipment. And now we have so many applications and able to, just go to a website with a station specific URL, and you're able to pipe in and do sportscasts, sports shows. I think it's taught you to be very flexible. You've had to be very flexible. If you were not, then this was going to be a very difficult 15, 16 months. So I think the adaptability to work from home is something that has been an adjustment. I know for myself, because I've done the Elks broadcasts for so long. I'm kind of used to working remotely, so it really wasn't a big change. But there was a lot of layers that you need to learn to, how am I going to go on the air? How am I going to be timely with my sportscast? Things of that nature. So, and being flexible. I mean, I've worked in the garage. I've worked. Lots of places. The dining room table I'm at a lot during the day. So first half of my day I'm up there, and then the second half I'm down here when I do my sportscast, because I kind of need a change of scenery. If I was down here all the time, I think I go nuts, and if I was upstairs all the time, well, it wouldn't work anyway. But I think the adaptability of the last 15, 16 months has been, I think, the biggest takeaway. And I know I've said to a few people at work, there's a lot of the stuff that we're using now, technology-wise, that I hope we don't get rid of, because I think it is a valuable asset. But I'm impressed with you watch the TV shows and all the the NHL insiders or the CFL, NFL insiders, NBA. Everyone's doing their stuff from home, and it sounds and it looks really, really good. So I got to give credit to the sports industry for really finding ways to be innovative and creative during this time.
Absolutely, and we've all tried to make the best of it, and it looks like now hopefully we're in the home stretch with light at the end of the tunnel. And as it applies to you most directly, that means the CFL season is on its way, recently getting full approval to return on August 5th. With the 14-game regular season shortened a little bit this year. When that came down that okay, there's something in place that just has to get ratified, and then when it did get full approval, what were your first thoughts and feelings when you got the full green light that there's going to be a CFL season this year?
Yeah, it was a little surreal, and it was very exciting. And at the same time, you were kind of like, well, I really hope we can get this in the bag. But it was nice just to hear some positive news. And instead of hoping to play, the plan is we are going to play, and I think that's fantastic. So it was, it was just something you needed, right? And I think we all missed CFL football in 2020. And I think we have seen the reaction. I think there is confirmation that there's still a lot of interest and a lot of passion for the Canadian Football League, and the fact that fans will be able to get into the stands. And I know that's being worked on still. I mean, all the protocols aren't finished yet. There's still issues about the quarantine period for players coming across the border. The CFL will like 7 days. It's currently 14. I think it's a good chance it'll get to 7. And then the fans protocol is different than the return to play, but that's looking very optimistic as well, that you'll be able to get a good amount of fans in the building. So, I just think it's another step in normalcy on the track to being, kind of a normal society, normal functioning society again. And part of that is, doing my job and like having that part of my portfolio back, but just more importantly for everyone else is watching the Canadian Football League again, whether it's on, listening to the radio, on television, or going to the stadium, which is honestly still the best experience of all. Nothing like experiencing live sports in an open environment and with people around you that most of them cheering for the same team, some are not, and that's always fun too because you get to rib your people with the different color shirt too. So, but it's just the shot in the arm we needed.
Well, you're talking to somebody who grew up in Calgary going to the Labor Day game for the Stampeders. So
you've been happier than I have for the most part.
little bit.
Yes.
Before we get into some of the football details about this season, I wanted to go further into to talk about the fan side of it, because the CFL is obviously a fan-driven league, a gate-driven league, and there's been over the last, like we were saying, year plus, there was talk about a season last year that wasn't able to go ahead, and then seems for everybody in the sports world, fans are a moving target, and it seems like it's now solely based on the provincial orders and whatnot. How, and you were talking about getting back to the stadium at Commonwealth Stadium in Edmonton, getting back to the fans. Just how important is it to the CFL to return with its fans?
It's the only reason the CFL can operate really right now. Gate revenue, so that's fans in the stands, accounts for 2/3 of a team's revenue, or very close to that. The league reportedly lost $50 to $80 million last year by not playing. So that's huge. So, I hear the criticism, well, why are they such a gate-driven league? Well, it's just because they are. Now, they need other forms of revenue to come in to help with that. The TV contract helps. If Bill C-218 comes in, the single sports betting bill comes in, that's going to be a nice chunk of change for CFL teams. But yeah, I mean, this season doesn't happen unless the fans protocol was approved by all health authorities at all levels. And it's a fact. It's a fact that MLSC, who owns the Toronto Argos, didn't want to play unless they were guaranteed there would be fans in the stands, and there will be. So it is the lifeblood of the Canadian Football League, is having people coming into stadiums, watching games, and enjoying CFL football, enjoying the product. And, 2/3 of your revenue, that's a pretty significant number, goes towards a team's bottom line. And you look at the Elks 2020 financial report, and they lost $7 million, right? So, and they slashed staff like everyone else did, and slashed payroll, and still they lost $7 million, right? So that's huge. So this season cannot happen. And you mentioned last year they were close to a season in Winnipeg in the bubble for 6 weeks between October 1 and December 1. But they didn't want to do it for the cost of $30 million because they didn't get that tax-free from the government. But, and I always felt that they should have just ponied it up themselves because I thought the exposure was worth it. But yeah, this season doesn't happen unless fans are in the building, and they're going to be in the building. And I think that's the big key for a 2021 season happening starting August 5th.
So the Elks host the Ottawa Red Blacks on August 7th to open up their season. As we alluded to earlier, of course, the Labor Day and rematch goes September 6 and 11 against the Stampeders. And I follow you on Twitter, and anybody who follows you on Twitter has noticed a steady stream of tweets from your account talking about roster signings and coaching changes and updates and whatnot. How much fun has it been to get back to being a football analyst?
It's great. It's fun to be reporting the day-to-day stuff because, but before the return to play got finalized, before that it was the draft, right? In early May. and that's always a fun night and eventful. But since then, there's been hardly anything to talk about. So, yeah, it's been pretty busy over the last a week or so. It's always fun to see the day-to-day stuff and the signings. Unfortunately, some retirements as well. I mean, it's the harsh reality of the pandemic is some players just can't, afford to come up here and play. They have jobs or family obligations and have to play or have to opt out to play. So, yeah, it's been fun. And this is the rush of the job, is you get to follow the team every day and you get to see what they're doing. You get to talk to them and then report on what's happening. And it was fun, free agency period. I'll go back there. I mean, the Elks were very busy leading up to free agency and on free agency day. So that's always fun when you can speculate and when you can, weave a tale and report on what, people, there's a ton of Elks fans and it's fun to talk to them and it's fun to let them know what's going on. So it's you miss that rush and I'm glad it's back.
After so long off and so much has changed from on the field, as you say, lots is going to change with rosters and things after not playing for 2 years. Are you able to, at this point, look at, say, what the Elks have on the roster and start to make sense of what you think you might see out of them? Predictions, anything like that? Is it possible to try to make sense out of what you think the product's going to look like?
I think it's starting to become a lot clearer now because we're getting closer and we know there's going to be a season. I call the Elks the wild card of the West. I really do, because they could be as good as first or second or challenging for first or second, or they could fall back and be fourth. I don't think they'll be last in the division like some say. I think the BC Lions have the worst talent in the division, so I think they're going to be in the basement. But you look at the Saskatchewan Roughriders, so I think should be the favorites to finish first. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers, based on their Grey Cup win and the way they're structured, even though you look at their offense, you're like, okay, Andrew Harris is 33. Zach Collaros is always one hit away from being, on the sidelines. Their receiving core really hurt by the retirement of Brian Mitchell, who I thought was an excellent signing for them. They don't really have the punch offensively. They're pretty good defensively. The Calgary Stampeders, that's a real wild card for me too. I don't know how good they're going to be. And I know we've said that a few, the past few seasons, they won't be as good, and they end up not being too bad. And when you have Bo Levi Mitchell, you have a chance. When you have John Huffnagel as your GM, you have a chance. Dave Dickinson's an excellent head coach. But man, I look at that roster and I'm going, that is a depleted offense for sure. So they're really going to have to win games defensively, I think, for a lot of the season. The Elks, honestly, they're the wild card. You got Trevor Harris, a quarterback who was plagued by injury in 2019 in the second half. The signing of Darrell Walker was huge. I think Greg Ellingson, that they were able to bring him back, was a big signing. The running back situation is interesting. Like, I don't know which James Wilder Jr. is going to show up. If it's the one we saw in 2017 for the last half of that season, I think this is a great signing. Terry Williams is an interesting, and you know about Terry Williams, obviously, being a Stampeders fan, and he killed the Elks in the past. He really did. I get nightmares thinking about Terry Williams sometimes, but he's someone that definitely can change a game, complexion of a game for sure. The offensive line, obviously, with Derek Dennis stepping away for 2021, that hurts, but they have depth at offensive line. They got good Canadian talent there. Defensively, I think that's where maybe the question marks lie, especially in their linebacking core. They don't have a lot of veteran help there, but they have Vontae Diggs, who was pretty good in 19, and we'll see where he ends up. The front four should still be good, with Kwaku Boateng leading the way at the rush end spot, and Sean Lemon as the bookend. And I think they're going to miss Armando Sewell, but I think Mike Moore and Jake Seresna are pretty good. The secondary, I think this has always been the weakness of the team. I think it has a chance to be strength. When you have Jonathan Rose and Jonathan Mincy on the corners, I think that's potential to have a really, really good lockdown presence. And then Aaron Grimes coming back is a big one. And there's going to be competition at the other halfback spot. Forrest Hightower's been hurt a lot. And Jordan Hoover, can he take a step at safety? So, and then special teams, kicking game's always been good with Sean White and Hugh O'Neill. I think that'll improve or stay the course. So, yeah, I think overall, and then, the intangibles, the coaching staff led by Jamie Elizondo, who's a first-year head coach, but has a lot of experience in this league. So I think this team, if they can put it together, because on paper they look good, but the game's not played on paper, if they can come together in a good amount of time in a 14-game season, I think this is a team that could be a force to be reckoned with.
Talking this week on Behind the Mic with Dave Campbell from the Edmonton Elks broadcast crew on 630 CHED in Edmonton. And just before we go to our first break here, Dave, there was one other big piece of news, of course, from Edmonton, and that was, of course, the dropping of the original team name back in July, and then the announcement of the new name and logo, the Elks name and logo for the team in June. How has that been received in the market, and what are your thoughts on it?
I think overall, it's the name's been a hit. The logo has been well received. I think the only thing is the antlers on the helmet has been kind of debated, but I think overall, it's an overwhelming pass. I remember walking into the stadium, and this was my first public event in, I can't remember, over a year. And it was a smaller gathering, of course, because of COVID restrictions. But I remember feeling, I don't know how I'm going to react to this, because honestly, back in July of 2020, when the name was retired, the name Eskimos, that was a hard one for me personally. And I understand the issues around it. But, I thought it was a name that was really honored or was used honorably by the football team, and the controversy surrounding it just wouldn't go away. And I think at a certain point, you have to deal with that controversy. And I remember Chris Presson, the president and CEO, saying it's like we plug one hole and three more show up. You can't ever win that battle. So I think the right decision was to move on and retire the name. But when I saw the presentation of Elks and I saw that big logo at center field, that 65-yard logo, which I don't think is going to be staying, because there's some rules and regulations against that, because there's also advertising you got to put on the field. But I was blown away. So I did shed a tear or two when the old name was retired, and I shed a tear or two when the new name came in, because I think this has so much marketing potential. I think there's so much you can do with the name and the logo. And I think the fact that you can attract a younger audience, I think this is a win. I mean, in their first week of merchandise sales, they sold as much merchandise as they did in 3 straight home games. And that's good home games. So we're talking like crowds of 35, 40,000 in succession. So that's huge. And they've had to reorder. I think they were close to, at the time when I had this conversation with Alan Watt, their executive director of marketing. So this was a week into the name. They were very close to ordering for a third time all the merchandise. So this has been a huge hit, I think, for the team and for the fan base. There's some that, will never live it down that they retired the old name. And unfortunately for those people, they're probably going to be left behind. And there's some that are disappointed, but are willing to give this a chance and understand why the move was necessary. So onward and upward, I think Elks is a hit.
How many debates have you had about the S? The Elk versus Elks debate.
Yeah. Like, to me, it's like, I understand it. Like, well, Elk is plural. Yeah, but it sounds silly to say Edmonton Elk. Like Elks, like Toronto Maple Leafs, and like that's a good example, right? I think the S makes it just sound better, and it is grammatically correct and proper according to Oxford Dictionary, and to and I know the team sought out a linguistics expert from the U of A, and they said it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. I think it's better to say the name with the S on the end. It just sounds a whole lot better, and I think it just sounds a whole lot proper. So, and again, look, some people who love grammar will not like this statement. It's a sports team. It's not a grammar lesson.
It's a great look, and like we were saying, we're just happy to have the CFL back coming up in a couple of months. We're going to take our first break here on Behind the Mic, and we'll be back with more with Dave Campbell as we'll get into more of his story from his career in sportscasting around the Edmonton sports market. So thanks for watching here on Behind the Mic on ASTV. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Behind the Mic here on ASTV Productions. Jonathan Hodgson in conversation with Dave Campbell from the Edmonton Elks broadcast crew on 630 Chad. Had a good time in the first segment talking about the upcoming season for the Canadian Football League and the Elks. And for most of the rest of our time here today, I want to get into your story, Dave, about your beginnings in the industry and some of the experiences you've had. But just before we get into your story, I did have one more football question left over that we didn't get to in that first block, and it was one of the other big pieces of news for a while back in the spring, I believe March or so. The CFL and the XFL came out with that joint statement, reading something in the effect of engaging in talks to mutually benefit the growth of football. And there was theories and ideas every which direction about what that could mean. We haven't on a national level, we haven't heard much of it since there's been new things in the news cycle for the CFL since then. How much play did that get within the market? And what did you make of it?
Well, when the release came out, like you say, it was in early March. It did, make your head snap to attention, right? And make, and you go, wow, that's something. And I think it's significant because we're not talking about the XFL as it was under Vince McMahon. We're talking about the XFL under Redbird Capital, led by Danny Garcia and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Redbird's a powerhouse. I would say Garcia and Johnson probably have more money than Vince McMahon combined, and they know a lot of people. They've made a lot of good hires, that people that have worked in the NFL from the marketing and from the streaming side. From the CFL's perspective, I think it's smart to enter into these talks because they have to find a way to be a sustainable brand, not just in 2021, but when we're talking about the league in 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 years from now or more. This has to be a sustainable product. And I think the problem with the CFL is the status quo has been something that they've leaned on way too long. We'll just do things the way we do. Well, it's great in some respects, but in other respects, they've missed out on some opportunities, I think, to better themselves and to advance their marketing capabilities. And I think there's been just too many old school thinking. We're back in the 80s and 90s, and that's where we should stay. When, now they're on TikTok. All the teams are on TikTok. Well, I don't know why it took this long, but they're on TikTok. So that's a nice step in the right direction. So I think it's being innovative. It's achieving, trying to achieve the younger audience, or trying to bring an audience. And I think it's just trying to be relevant. And I love the CFL. I always will, but I'm in my mid 40s. We need to have people that are 35 and under, see the league as an attractive product and not just an option to go out on a warm day on a Friday night or a Saturday and get a beer and a hot dog and never pay any attention to the game. You're just there as a social event. But I think there is some aspects of that too. You look at Winnipeg, you look at Ottawa, you look at Hamilton. It's a very festive atmosphere, and I think that's what's missing in the CFL. And I think Redbird and the XFL can help with that. I think the league can help, the CFL can help the XFL in how to run a league. I mean, they've only done it for over 100 years. They kind of know what they're doing. What I didn't like from the get-go is the insinuation that the teams would play each other, that we would have one league. And I think it was a wildly speculative statement to make. And I think that has harmed this process because it got people very nervous, upset, when I don't think we're even close to that. They could merge, they could join. I don't know how you do it logistically with the schedule because you can't play, March, April here. You just can't. You can't do it in every part of Canada or most part of Canada. So that part I don't understand it. The rules and innovations, yeah, I think there's some things they can take from the XFL. I think the XFL can take some things from the CFL. So I'm kind of happy this is more back burner now and that we're talking about a 2021 season for the CFL because I think that's what was really lost in the XFL CFL talks. And I just wish it was reported better than it was. And I know there's non-disclosure agreements around these whole talks, but people do hear things from other sources. I know, up here, MLSE really wants it because they see this is the big way they can market the CFL going forward. That's fine, but I hope they just do it smartly. So I just hope we pump the brakes on this and just enjoy this season and let the XFL CFL thing kind of play out. But I think the people that are involved understand what's at stake here. And I don't think they're going to be damaging to the process.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be interesting to see how things play out in the long run for sure. But getting into your story now for a bit, we've made mention to your tenure doing Elks games beside Morley Scott right now and Bryan Hall before that, producer of Inside Sports with Reid Wilkins, also on 630 Chad. Let's go back before all that though. Tell me about your early sports fandom and what got you hooked on making sports your life.
Well, I've always been a sports fan growing up as a kid. Loved the Oilers, loved the Eskimos. Just love them and love going to games and my grandpa and I would watch a lot of sports and my grandma and grandpa lived in Camrose. We would go to the local arena and just watch a game on a Saturday, right? And it didn't matter who it was. We just loved doing it. And then going in intermissions and watching curling going on because there was a curling rink attached to the old rec center where the a lot of the minor hockey was played in the main arena where the Augustana Vikings played and things of that nature. The Viking Cup was there for so many years. That was kind of like the second tier World Junior Hockey Championships, and that was a lot of fun to live at the rink, for a week or 10 days or however long it was. Always kind of had a sporting interest. I know my aunt is a big fan of the football team, my Aunt Denise, and she's and I married into a family that loves football and loves sports, so that's always been pretty cool. But beforehand, yeah, I mean, I wanted to throw a ball, wanted to pick up a hockey stick, wanted to swing a baseball bat, just wanted to play sports. And the actual covering of sports is something I was interested in because I think I knew pretty early on I wasn't good enough to play sports for a living because we all kind of have that dream. And then I think for 99% of the population, we realize, yeah, we're not good enough to do that. I'm not part of that 1% that is really gifted. But the sports aspect of the media side always interested me. I used to record myself doing play-by-play of Oiler games or hockey games or football games or baseball games. Never did basketball because I just that to me is very complicated. And yeah, it just kind of grew from there. All through high school, just had this idea that I wanted to be in sports. So was able to get into NAIT in 1994 in January. And, the rest is history, I guess, as they say. But, able to do some sports at NAIT as well. I mean, I called Ooks games and I did color on Ooks hockey games, and Nate's fun because the program, the radio and television program, you're not sitting in a classroom all the time. You're actually doing radio or TV, so that's pretty cool. So sports has always been something I had a passion for, and I think covering sports and telling sports stories or stories around a sporting event or around a team is something that's always been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and that seems to be a common thread that comes up with all the sportscasters that we talk to on this show. The idea about being able to tell a story and relay that story between the team and the fan base. Were there any voices, sportscasters that you took a particular interest to when you were just a fan of the game and jumped into the biz yourself? Were there any broadcasters that you took a liking to?
Well, obviously at home here, Rod Phillips, play-by-play voice for the Oilers, and Bryan Hall, play-by-play voice for the Elks, who were under a different name before. Obviously, those were the two that I really gravitated towards. Don Whitman, longtime CBC broadcaster, who was one of the nicest people you'll ever meet as well. And I love meeting Don Whitman, but he could call everything. He could call hockey, football, curling. Always enjoyed him. Chris Cuthbert was one of my favorite people in the business, and actually getting the chance to meet him and form a friendship with him. Like I'm going pinch me right now. Like don't ever wake me up. If this is a dream. So those are the people I really look towards as influences and people that I really look up to and know how to bring the excitement to a game and know how to tell a tale. And Morley Scott, who I work with now, is another one I'll throw in that mix as well. I always love the way he again, storytelling. It's what's behind a play, what's behind a game, what's behind a certain section of the game. What's the lead up towards a game, and I think that's something I learned from him very much. And the same with Bryan Hall, the way he told a story during a football game. Rod Phillips is just raw excitement, and listening to, I listened to John Short as a kid. I listened to Bryan Hall on the weekends for his sports show. I think it was on Sunday nights, and just always had a really pull towards talk radio, because you hear news talk, but sports talk was kind of something that has grown over time, and those two did it so well. So those are some names I would throw in as big influences for me.
Yeah, and I'll echo your sentiments there, specifically about Chris Cuthbert. A few years back, I went to a BC Lions and Saskatchewan Roughriders game in Vancouver as a guest, Rod Peterson, who's been a good friend of mine in the business and is a friend of this show, and did the game in his booth. And before the game starts, he just says, "Hey, do you want to go meet Cece?" I'm like, "Of course." And we go in the back of the TSN booth, and he couldn't have been more accommodating, couldn't have been more engaging to talk to me for a few minutes. And some of it was me just sitting back watching the two of them go at it. But yeah, it's been remarkable to when it's really something when you meet other sportscasters who have, quote, been there, done that, and they're all in about learning about you and wanting to be a help in your career.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's the humility they have and the willingness to lend a hand. And, when I first met Bryan Hall, it was the most intimidating experience of my life, because all I knew was the persona he was on the radio. And he was tough. If you ever listened to his talk shows, he was very tough on people. Especially if you didn't think they were coming across very well or had an opinion that was not to his liking. But you meet the man up close, and Bryan Hall, the man, is one of the best people that I've ever met. And, he's one of my good friends. And I think it's the selflessness of these people that I mentioned before. And, Chris Cuthbert is a big selfless person, and so is everyone that I mentioned. And I think, you don't have everyone in the business that's like that. I think they take themselves way too seriously. And I think that's the problem with a lot of sports people in our industry, and really people that are in kind of in the public eye in this industry maybe take themselves a bit too seriously. But I think the humility that you need to carry is really important when you're in the public eye as well. And I think that is really key to being a successful broadcaster.
And you brought up Bryan Hall a few times from listening to him, and then you got to call Elks games with him for a few years, starting in 2006 to 09, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, his resume is pretty incredible in that Edmonton market, on the airwaves for 50 years. Canadian Football Hall of Famer, Alberta Sports Hall of Famer. What do you? I guess I'd like to hear about the early days of becoming his colleague and his broadcast partner, as somebody who's so well known in that market, and then kind of what you were able to learn from a guy like that.
So the first time I met Halsey was in September of 1995 when I walked into the station at 6:30 Ched to do my practicum. That was day one. And he comes down the stairs, and I look at him, and I'm waiting to be taken upstairs by Dave Jameson, who at the time was the program director. And I'm waiting for him, and Halsey comes downstairs, and I almost like I'm going to soil myself. That's how nervous I am. I didn't, but he came down, and I'm like, there he is. And then I'm like, he's not going to talk to me, is he? And he looks at me and goes, "What a lovely day, huh?" And I'm like, yeah, so but it was such a good relationship because I think I earned his trust very early. I got to work on his afternoon sports show at Ched for, a number of years. I can't even remember how, maybe 5, 6, 7 years, maybe. Because I was on the board as a tech producer from 95 to 03. So that's probably how long I've been with Halsey on his show, behind the scenes, and intense, can get a little grumpy at times, at you, and especially if you don't do your job as well as you should. But a very kind man overall. I just learned that, he always says this: I'm not just a sports guy, I'm a broadcaster. And I think that's good because sports, and I am a sports, I work in sports, but I'm also someone that is a broadcaster, and a broadcaster tells stories. And I think that's what I learned most about Bryan is there's always a story within the topic that you're talking about, and you just have to find it, right? And I think that's entertaining radio. It's not necessarily talking about, even though people want to know about the Oilers power play or hear your thoughts on the goaltending, hear your thoughts on the quarterback, and can the defensive line get to the quarterback with 4 instead of blitzing. I think there's more to it than that, right? And I think you have to find the substance behind a story. And I think Halsey has always been very, very good at doing that. And I always joke, I go, Halsey, who don't you know? He just knows so many people. And I think that's helped him become who he is because, you learn from experience, and you learn from experiences with people. And I think that really comes to the forefront too, is, after a while you have so many relationships that it just, your job kind of flows a lot better because you're able to get some certain, tidbits from people and able to, kind of put that out in the public in a very good way, in a safe way. And, I think storytelling is the lifeblood of our business. And I think Halsey is definitely at the top of the list as far as being a good storyteller.
All right, we got to take our next break here on Behind the Mic. We'll be back with one more segment with Dave Campbell from 630 Ched in Edmonton here on Behind the Mic on ASTV Productions.
Welcome to Pilot Mountain Hockey Academy, your world-class academic and hockey training facility created to maximize each student's athletic and academic potential. Blackjack Stewart Arena, home of the Buffalo, is inside the 46,000 square foot complex, as well as a curling rink and other facilities. The students have a unique combination of successful, well-rounded education at Pilot Mountain Collegiate Institute and the professional hockey training in an encouraging community. The years of experience of on-ice coaching propel our students to the next level, both mentally and physically, in a professional environment.
And back here with Dave Campbell from 630 Ched in Edmonton, color analyst for the Edmonton Elks of the CFL. And we're talking about your time with Bryan Hall, iconic sportscaster in Edmonton. And as you alluded to in that second block, you ran the board for Oilers games and Elks games for about 8 years before getting into the booth with the Elks games. And I just before we kick off our last block here, I kind of wanted to get your thought on the modern day Oilers and what do you think about where they're at with obviously McDavid and Draisaitl leading the way. But the playoff success hasn't really been there yet. What are your thoughts on them?
Yeah, it's been frustrating, I think, for Oiler fans because they want more than what they're seeing, and yet at the same time, what I think a lot of fans don't realize is you are getting more than what you endured in the decade of darkness. This was a team that, if you remember, under Ken Hitchcock when he was the interim coach, this was a terrible hockey team, and a team that housed Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl and Darnell Nurse, but it was basically AHL Edmonton. And I remember there were post-game shows where Reid Wilkins and Rob Brown, who's our inside the game analyst, former NHL player who lives here, and he said, this team is 12, 14 players away. Well, now they're not. They're 4 to 6 players away, probably. The playoff disappointment is, it is that. It was so disappointing that they lost to a 12 seed in the play-in round last year in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and then being swept by the Jets, a team who I think are clearly they're better. But, the goaltender, Connor Hellebuck, I think stole the first 2 games. You blow a 3-goal lead in the third period and you lose in overtime, and they played a whale of a game in game 4, but lose in triple overtime. I think it's pretty obvious what they need. They need more depth. They need more in their top 6. They tried with Dominic Cahoon, didn't really work. Kyler Yamamoto took a step back. So, is he a top 6 player? Is he more of a third liner? I don't know. Jesse Puljujarvi turned out to be the biggest story in my mind, other than, Connor McDavid scoring over 100 points in 56 games. The decision by Ken Holland not to trade Jesse Puljujarvi is his best decision. So he's turned into a good player. Their defense, Darnell Nurse had a tremendous year. I thought Tyson Barrie had a really good year from a supercharged offensive standpoint. I thought Larson played better as the season went along. Goaltending, Mike Smith had one of the best seasons he's ever had. But I think the depth has to be addressed in the forward group, and I think they probably could use another steady defenseman in their top 4. And Ken Holland's coming into this offseason with a lot of cap space potentially, but you got Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. That's a big decision. Darnell Nurse, that you're gonna have to re-sign him. Larson, the Tyson Barrie decision, which might be taken out of their hands anyway if he decides to go elsewhere. But I do think it's a team that is better. And if you look at their division next year, the Pacific Division is not very good. The best 2 teams right now we can say are Vegas and the Edmonton Oilers. So I think this is a critical offseason for Ken Holland. He's not going to be able to address everything this offseason, but I think he can really put a dent into the problems of this team going forward.
And going back over to football for just a moment longer, a question that I wanted to run by you, just because it interests me, having a baseball background. The challenge of broadcasting football has always been intriguing to me, and I've seen it up close with Rod Peterson, and I've talked a little bit with Rod Black in the past, and just when I look at football and just the sheer roster sizes and and the amount of people on the field and the amount of things to look at, especially for yourself, being a color analyst. And even we're talking before about all the updates that you're keeping track of leading up to the season. What are some of the unique aspects and challenges of broadcasting football and being a football color analyst?
Well, being a football color analyst, it is challenging. I mean, doing live sports, period, is challenging. It's challenging for different reasons. If you compare hockey, you hear the play-by-play voice a lot more than the color analyst because the play is constantly going, right? You can have plays like you can have 5 minutes straight of action and hardly hear from the color guy. Where in football, like the average play I heard was about 7 seconds. So you're not hearing as much from the play-by-play guy in comparison to hockey, but you're hearing more of the color guy. So I think there is some pressure of I always got to have something to say. And if a significant play happens, yeah, it's easy. But when a running back gets stuffed for a yard or gets only a yard or gets 0 yards, I mean, there's only so much you can really, say about that play necessarily, unless it was a really spectacular play. So there's always things you have to kind of have in your hip pocket. The note taking throughout the week is very, very important. So you have it at your disposal, and you don't use every note that you write down, but it's there just in case. And then I think it's just letting kind of the game develop in what story are we going to tell? It's back to storytelling again. But there's no question. I mean, the color analyst in football, there's a lot of spotlight on that particular person because there is a lot less action compared to hockey. I mean, you look at baseball. I mean, there's another sport where the color analyst has to be someone who's engaging, who's going to be fun, going to tell stories and talk about the game at the same time. And, for football, because there's so much dead time, not as much dead time as baseball, but, the color analyst, you got to come up with a lot of good stuff and make sure that you're filling the gaps as often as you can. And that's, that's always the challenge. And, there's sometimes when I'm, in the middle of the game, I'm going, yeah, there's just not much going on here and there's just nothing to talk about. And I don't know if I can even bring a note in here because it's so irrelevant to what we're talking about because the game's so terrible, right? So those games are difficult. Yeah, but it's, it's fun. I love the challenge, and it's something I look forward to, and I can't wait to get back in the booth and experience that again.
Yeah, and in baseball, one of the unique things about it is it's one of the few games where you, as the broadcaster, carry the game. In continuous action sports like hockey, like basketball, the game carries you. The game goes until it stops. But in baseball, it's pitch and then 20 or 30 seconds, and then pitch. And then when there's an action pitch, there's a little bit more. But that's, and just the culture and the atmosphere around baseball really lends itself to what we've been talking about with the storytelling of getting to know the personalities and the people behind the players, and it's a very experiential game. It's always interesting to compare the different feelings between the different games. But I wanted to get into talk about some of the big assignments you've had in your career. And specifically, we'll talk first about the couple of Grey Cups you've covered. The 2010 Grey Cup in Edmonton, and then the 2015 Edmonton win in Winnipeg. Is there a heightened focus when you're calling a Grey Cup game?
Well, unfortunately, I didn't get to call those games. In 2010, I was a reporter. We had of course, had the national broadcast, but I was more of a, kind of a feature reporter that week. But that was still fun. It's fun to be around the teams and be around the festival and be around different, it's fun to have all the media in your city There's kind of a downside to have the Grey Cup in your city because you're not staying downtown. You're actually, at the time I was living 25 minutes from downtown, and was a pain in the butt trying to get to downtown for certain media events. So I had an education in 2010 for sure, but that was a lot of fun. I mean, the Riders in Commonwealth playing the Alouettes, I can't remember that stadium ever being louder. That was pretty cool. In 2015, got to go to Winnipeg and watch the Eskimos play the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And the reason why I didn't call the game is because under the broadcast agreement, Bell, which is TSN, they negotiated to have the radio rights for the Grey Cup game, and they got it. So even though we called the games all year, we weren't able to do the Grey Cup because the rights were given to Bell, which, I have my opinion on that, but I won't share it here. But it was fun. I think, I would love another chance to cover a Grey Cup with the Elks, because I don't think I enjoyed it as much as I wanted to, because I didn't understand the work maybe as well, not at all compared to now. But I remember working till 2-3 in the morning too many times, and I'm going, what am I doing? So, but it was still fun. I mean, it was a great experience. When you're covering your team in a neutral city, you kind of become a bit of a focal point for other media, because they want to know things about the team and they want to chat you up. So that was kind of fun. Now I'll tell this story. So it was really strange on Grey Cup Sunday, because Morley and I are used to ramping up towards game day. So we were ramping up, and then by Saturday we had really nothing else to do. So that, we went through the walkthroughs, and we had went to the pregame press conferences with, Mike Riley and Chris Jones, who was the coach at the time. Then we put that in the bag, and that was it. We had a morning, an hour Grey Cup special, and then went back to the hotel, then did a 2-hour pregame show up until kickoff, or I think 4:00. And then we took a cab and went to IG Field, found our spot in the press box. And that was weird. We're in the press box and we're live tweeting the game, but it's a different perspective, because you're in a different location than you're used to, and you're not calling the game. So I had to leave in the third quarter, at the end of the third quarter, because I had to go back to the media hotel to get ready to host our post-game show. So I walk out of the stadium, and I'm wondering, where are the cabs? So I'm talking to one of the volunteers there, and I'm going, where's the taxi stand? And it's like, you have to go turn here and then turn here, and it's on that corner. I said, I got to walk 3/4 around the stadium to get a cab. And then I had no time to talk. So I start hoofing it. I get a cab. I text Morley, I'm in the cab. He says 6 minutes and 30 seconds left in the game. I go, what? Are you kidding me? I don't even know if I'm going to make it back in time to the hotel. So I punched the game up on my phone, right? And I'm going, oh, I'm sorry, work. These are data charges. Please understand. I'm going to have to maybe explain this later. Nothing happened, thankfully. But that is when, if you remember, the infamous challenge on the pass interference call, where Chris Jones wasn't going to throw the flag, and Kenny Stafford, one of the receivers, went nuts on him, went absolutely ballistic. And then Chris Jones, I think out of annoyance, threw the flag. Smart, because it went in the Elks' favor that day, and they won the football game. So I got back to the stadium to the hotel with 4 minutes and 30 seconds left in the second half. So that was great. So, but that, I'll never forget the panic I felt trying to get a cab and then getting back to the hotel. And we ended up doing a 3-hour, 20-minute post-game show after the Elks won the Grey Cup. So that memory will always stick with me.
Oh man, that's great stuff. You've also had the opportunity to call some events away from football, a little bit of a change of pace. You've covered a number of curling events from the 2005 to 2013 Briars, the 07 World Men's Curling Championship, 09 Roar of the Rings. What's that like being a football guy, going into curling. That's a pretty drastic change in game day experience, I would think.
Yeah, because there's 3 draws a day, and not every draw matters. Let's be honest. There are some certain games on the draw sheet that day that you go, oh, I'm going to circle this one. Like, if it was Alberta, Manitoba, Stoughton versus Martin, or if it was Martin versus Glen Howard of Ontario, those are things you would circle. Yeah, curling's tough just because you're there all the time. I mean, you're literally there all day. Now there were some events where I was told, hey, take the morning draw off, right? Just cover the afternoon and the evening draw. Okay. Now, when you're doing a Brier, it's a little different because you're covering Alberta, and there's some other sheets that are, other games that are important. Worlds is easy because you're just covering Canada, so that's not so bad. Sometimes there's like 1 draw a day, so it was not so bad. The 09 Roar of the Rings. Wow. I lived at the Coliseum for, 8-9 days, whatever it was. And it was the curling trials are so fantastic because it's not provincial representation. It's the best teams, men, women in the country. And it's just fabulous curling. And I remember we did some live shows. We didn't do a live broadcast, but I remember calling a few shots of the game, of the gold medal game for men and women. Martin beat Howard pretty significantly, and it was Cheryl Bernard beat Shannon Clybrink in a brilliant game where I believe Clybrink was it Clybrink? No, it was Bernard who was trying to draw for the win, and she was a little heavy, and then the rock dug in. That was one of the most thrilling finishes I've ever seen. But just to see the power of Kevin Martin at the time was so much fun. Like he was the best curler on the planet at that time, and was for a few years. So, and curling's fun because of the competitors. They are the most down to earth people you could ever meet, and some are razor sharp. Like they're like focused, and they'll they're hard to talk to sometimes. I know Kevin Martin can be like that, but Kevin Martin can be a lot of fun too. But I love the curling because of the people too, and the crowds are great. The Briar Patch is fun. It's a different pace. There's a lot of waiting in curling. There's no question. I mean, you things happen quick. So the draw ends. You got to get your stuff. You got to post it. You got to write, and then it's done. Then you're waiting for 3 more hours, right? So it's fun though. I love living at the curling rink. I think of all the curling events I've done, again, the 09 Roar of the Rings, that's probably my favorite just because of the talent was just so good.
Have there been any assignments along the way that you've done that were kind of off the radar, so to speak, or things that you might sit back and say, gee, I didn't envision myself doing that sort of thing? Are there any sort of off the wall assignments you've had?
There's one that really comes to the forefront. I think it's the only one. So back in 2008, the Elks organization brought a soccer game to Edmonton. It was the Vancouver Whitecaps against the LA Galaxy. On the surface, you go, who cares? Well, David Beckham played for the LA Galaxy at the time. So this was in April. So the Galaxy put an invitation for Edmonton media to be flown to LA and to be exclusive with David Beckham. Now I thought, I get a one-on-one interview. No, it was just the small Edmonton contingent, or whoever came, the half dozen that were in a room with David Beckham. I'm like, okay, that's fine. So that was pretty cool. Got to see the stadium they played in. I spent one night in LA, or I think in a suburb of LA, and then got the bus to the transportation to the stadium, came back to the hotel, filed. Then I was home that night. I had to stop through Vancouver and cleared customs, and I got to jump on a flight to Edmonton and was home. So for about, I don't know, wow, how long was it? 36 hours, I'll say, just for argument's sake. I was in Los Angeles covering David Beckham, and then when they came in May, I was able to be on the sidelines because we did the broadcast, and we got the Whitecaps crew to do the broadcast. I was on sidelines on the Whitecaps side, or in between the Whitecaps and the Galaxy. And I did the sideline reporting. That was pretty cool. So that was a lot of fun. I think the other one was when we had the IndyCar series, or the kart series, that came to Edmonton, the Edmonton Indy. I think the second time around, so 2006, I believe, I got the call turn one. So I was the turn one reporter. That was a lot of fun too. I'll never forget. It was probably 40 degrees or more with the humidity. And I'm in, because you can't wear shorts. You got to wear basically long sleeves and long pants and shoes, because if there's a fire that break out, you got to protect yourself. And I'll never forget, I'm around all these tires, the tire barrier. I'm right behind the tire barrier. It was so hot. And I remember our engineer at the time, who was helping me with my location, just kept pumping, giving me waters. I'm just sitting there going like that. I'm like Stone Cold Steve Austin with, give me another beer. It just was crazy that day. And I don't think I had to pee the whole day because it was so hot. Right. So that was another fun moment. That was a little bit unorthodox, but something I'll never forget.
That's great stuff. As we start to wrap up here on Behind the Mic with Dave Campbell this week from 6:30 CHED in Edmonton, part of the Edmonton Elks broadcast crew. As you sit here today, getting ready for the new football season, is there anything you can look back on your career right now and say, you know what, I'm pretty proud of that? And have there been lessons along the way that you've learned that have been valuable, that you think might be valuable for other sportscasters out there?
Yeah, I mean, a career-defining moment. I don't know. It's, I think being named color analyst of the Elks back in 2006, that was probably a benchmark for me, because I knew 3 weeks prior to the first game in Regina, the first preseason game, that I was going to be the new color analyst. So I was expecting to be back on sidelines, because I worked the two previous seasons as the sideline reporter on the Elks sideline. So, that was a career-defining moment, just because I don't remember preparing for it. I just remember doing the first game and then letting it come after that, right? So it's been a long journey in that process. So that's the career-defining moment for me, is just, it's kind of unusual for someone like me who didn't play at that level to be in that role. And I always found that to be very challenging, but something that I think I've been able to overcome and get a lot of help in overcoming it and learning the game from that perspective. I've always been a football junkie, but I've learned so much. So yeah, 3 weeks before my first game, and I had no idea I was going to call my first game with Bryan Hall in a preseason game in Regina at Taylor Field. On that day, 3 weeks prior, I did. And I'll tell you, it was the most scary 3 weeks of my life. So, but that was a lot of fun. Sometimes baptism by fire is the best way to go. What did I learn about myself? Again, I think it's don't take yourself too seriously. Enjoy the job. I've been in the job for in this business for over 25 years, and it's gone so fast. It really has. And I think, and this is in every walk of life, but, count your blessings and realize where you're at is, maybe not as bad as you think. And if it is, then you got to find a way to change it. I mean, there are times I was disgruntled at CHED because I thought I wasn't going anywhere. And you have to learn that, sometimes maybe you're in this spot for a reason. So that's what I learned. It was 8 years to get out from behind the board as a tech producer, because I thought I could do so much more. But it was those 8 years that kind of really set things up for the rest of my career and, and beyond. So, I think it's just be willing to learn, be willing to be adaptable, be willing to be flexible. What we've all learned in the last 15, 16 months through this pandemic, I think that stays true in every walk of life, post-pandemic and post-COVID. It's really a theme for life. And I think I've learned that a lot. And I would just tell myself in the past, Dave, just zip it. Just don't be so willing to open your mouth as much. Learn to listen, learn to be be a sponge, be more, just be more willing to take stuff in more. So yeah, that's what I would say. It's kind of layered, but I think humility, again, comes back to that is be a humble person, and be someone that is willing to always learn and never feel like you've arrived. Because if you do feel that way, then I think you've kind of lost your edge and your passion for whatever you're doing.
Absolutely. Well, Dave, we'll leave it there. But thanks so much for coming on this week and talking a little football with us and sharing some of your story. Really enjoyed catching up with you. Very grateful that you would take the time. Before we let you go here, we mentioned before August 7th, the Elks open up against Ottawa for the new season. You'll be on the call with Morley Scott for that game. And you also produce Inside Sports with Reid Wilkins on 6:30 CHED. When and where do we find Inside Sports? And is there anything else you want to let the viewers know about?
Yeah, well, Inside Sports is the other thing I do, and we'll just quickly touch on that. I've been part of the show for almost as long as I've worked at CHED. I mean, Inside Sports launched in 1997 with Sid Smith, and now it's Reid Wilkins as host. And I've worked with 4 hosts. I've worked with Al Stafford. I've worked with Dan Tenser as well. It's been fun, and that's been a progression as well. But we're on from 6 to 8 on 6:30 CHED. We're also the voice of the Oilers and the Elks, so there's some nights that we're not on. Reid is an excellent host. Again, good at telling stories, good at bringing opinion out there, good at having fun. And it's fun to kind of coordinate a day, coordinate a plan for the day and the week and weeks ahead. So, that's the other thing that I do every day. I'm also on the sports desk on Global News Radio 880. That's a lot of fun as well to create and to just present the news and also, again, telling stories. So, it's a lot of fun. I'm never bored in this job. Every day always brings something very challenging and exciting, and that's what I love about it. But yeah, Inside Sports, 6 to 8 weeknights on 6:30 CHED. So give it a listen.
Sounds great. We'll find you there. All right, we'll let you go, Dave. But thanks so much for coming on with us.
Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate the invite.
We'll take one more break here on Behind the Mic, and I will be back for the wrap-up. We'll tie a bow on this show and get you ready for next week here on Behind the Mic on ASTV Productions. And once again, one more time, welcome back to Behind the Mic here on ASTV Productions. Jonathan Hodgson back to wrap up another show here for another week on Behind the Mic. Thanks again to our guest, Dave Campbell from 6:30 CHED in Edmonton, color voice of the Edmonton Elks of the CFL, getting ready for their new season starting up August 7th. As the CFL returns to play. Had a great time talking about the upcoming season in the CFL and then going back into some of Dave's career story, broadcasting for 25 years in the Edmonton sports market. Some great stories and some great lessons. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you had fun as I did and as Dave did. And once again, thanks to him for coming on. We broadcast same time, same place every week here on ASTVProductions.com. Simulcast on Facebook, 5 Pacific, 8 Eastern every Friday night. If you want to find further updates, ASTV is also over on Twitter. That's where you can find us, as well as all of our other shows and live game broadcasts here on ASTV as well. We're really excited about our next couple of guests we have coming up the next couple of weeks here on Behind the Mic. Just finalizing the schedule right now, and then we'll get the announcements out about those upcoming guests, and we hope we'll have you along with us. So, one final time for my guest, Dave Campbell. I'm Jonathan Hodgson. Thanks for watching Behind the Mic. Thanks for making us part of your Friday evening, and we'll talk to you again next week.